And for that reason, and that reason only, I'm not a Swiftie anymore. I'm not. Alright, I'm a Swiftie. Welcome back to the workshop. Today we're diving into a much needed upgrade of my miter saw station. When I first bought this house a couple years ago, this was all I needed really to get me started, but now that I'm spending more time in the workshop, we definitely need an upgrade. This is not going to be one of those typical YouTube powerhouse miter saw stations because number one, I really don't need a ton more storage. B, I don't really have a room for something that big. And 3, to be honest with you, I don't have the sponsors to help me pay for a $2,500 masterpiece. So if you're looking for something that will get the job done, look pretty good, stick around, this video is for you. So after removing my makeshift collection hood, I'm just removing some pocket screws that kept this top on. One of the things I want to change about this is the area that the miter saw sits in. I want to make this a little wider. When you're doing your miter cuts, it just hits here. So what I want to do is I want to make this space wider and have the new sheet of plywood meet up with this instead of leaving a gap. So that's definitely one thing I want to tackle. I'm going to take this other top off now. Now, if you're in a basement like I am or a garage, a lot of time these floors are not level. So I use the method of using a T-nut at the bottom of my legs and a bolt. That way I can just dial it in by moving that bolt in and out. Now to unload this sheet of melamine. This thing is no joke. Holy crap, I forgot how heavy these things were. Damn 20-year-old loaded it in my truck. Didn't break a sweat. Son of So to cut this melamine, I'm going to use my track saw. My table saw there's just stuff everywhere, and versus bringing the material to the blade, and this thing is so heavy, I'm just going to bring the blade to the material. I think this will be faster. So what I did was I grabbed the straightest board I had. I clamped it to each side just because I'm afraid of the track saw. I don't have an 8-foot track saw, or the track anyway. And I'm afraid that because this is so slick that this might move as I'm cutting. So I just put a straight edge to go along, and as long as I keep it butted up against it, it'll be the same distance. So we're going to give this a shot. And to make this first cut, I'm lowering my blade only about 1/8 of an inch. I'm making a scoring cut first. That's going to help with the chip out on the melamine. And once I made that score cut, I can cut full depth after this. And here you can tell that score cut definitely makes a difference. It's a pretty clean edge. I'm going to save you the time. But basically what I ended up doing is I took this section apart and I cut the length of it down by about 8 inches or so, 7 inches, because I want the 8-foot piece of melamine to be able to fit between here all the way up to the saw and then this 2-foot section on the other side of the saw. That way I didn't have to buy a second piece of melamine, if that makes sense. So I needed everything, the whole length of the miter saw station minus the saw. I had to make sure it was under 8 feet. So just trimmed this section down a bit. Now I'm going to measure the miter saw height so that when I'm working on this middle section, the miter saw will be level with the other work surfaces. By clamping on these 2x4s, it's just going to make it a lot easier for me to hold this in place while I screw it in versus just wrestling with it. Next, I'm going to grab a couple of these shims, and this back section here was actually a little bit too low. So adding in these shims just helps to lift it up a little bit while I can screw it in place. So this never happens. This is a scrap piece of plywood I found that almost exactly fits this middle section. I just had to trim off a couple of inches on one side. This never works out. And you know how I told you like this stuff never happens? This is where I just noticed something here. Check this out. Usually I put a hole in the back right corner for my dust collection hose. I swear this hole was already there.
Wow, what a hole.
Like this never happens to me. Now this halfway through hole here in the middle, that's going to get covered up by the saw, so I don't care about that. Now I just wanted to test the saw in place just to check side to side. And now you can see here the saw is a little bit too low, but that's perfect because I want to be able to shim it up. So I use washers for this. It works perfect. And now you can see with a level on here that the saw is just a hair higher than each side of the table. And that's kind of the way I like it, because really that table on the miter saw, the base of it, that's where you want your reference to be. And now I'm cutting that side table to length. I've already made the score cut, so this is the through cut. With leveling the right side of the table now, you can see this is where I just grab an assortment of different size washers and build up each side. Running through some scrap pine here. These are going to go next to the saw underneath the overhang of the table. And now I guess you could call this a little bit fancy. What I'm doing here is I'm breaking down some maple that I have. This is going to be the trim that goes all around the melamine. I don't want to see the particle board on the sides. So this is just gonna make it a little prettier. And I'm using, obviously, maple as a hardwood. The edges of the melamine will get banged up and they'll start to chip, so this maple hardwood will help it last a lot longer. Some wood glue and some brad nails here to hold it all in place. So you'll notice I just put it on wood glue on that side, and then I added some screws there to weigh it down. And on this side I'm using pocket screws. More on that in a second. Alright, so full disclosure. You saw me put the wood glue underneath here, and then I put those containers of nails on here to weigh it down. I completely forgot that it's melamine on both sides. Melamine and wood glue, that shouldn't work. So I had let it sit overnight, and I came down here this morning, and it worked. I mean, I don't know how well it's going to stay on there. I'm probably going to throw a few screws in here just in case, but this is not a structural piece. I kind of just added this piece of wood here to close it off. And maybe over time to prevent sagging, but this is not going to sag, not with the melamine and stuff. I'm surprised that held. The other side I pocket screwed into it. So, whatever that's worth for you. Melamine and wood glue, maybe works, I guess. Here I'm extending the angle of the miter saw. So when I turn the saw to make miter cuts, I don't want the handle to hit this part here, so I'm trimming off this section. And here I'm measuring how far over the handle would go. This will make more sense in a second. All right, so I put in 2 temporary screws here just to hold the saw in place for now. I just want to make sure things don't shift. So I've got this butted up to where I want to, and this is the mitered cut, angled cut I'm going to make here. That way it allows the handle to slide over. Now on these DeWalt saws, the angles are different. So if you notice, like, the blade is not actually in the middle of the saw. It's like 11 inches on this side and like almost like 14, I think, on this side. And so the angle is much more drastic on this side. Over here you can get up to 60 degrees. On the other side it's 50. So I got to cut all the way over here, and then instead of going through all the way to following the angle, I would have to cut into my my 2x4 frame here. But I don't need all that room because the handle actually stops like right about here. So I'm going to make a cut along this line and then this line. So in retrospect, this piece of trim could have came right up to here, but we can fix that. When you go to cut your angle, just remember that you also have to add in the trim piece. So over on the other side, I actually had just went and cut my line, and then I moved my handle over, and I'm like, oh, why is it just barely hitting? It's because I added the trim to it. So instead of cutting to the line, I was actually, cutting out here. So here's the line I drew, and I'm just going to put the trim I'm using against it, and then draw a line on the other side. And that's where you're going to want to cut. Because remember, you have to add that trim piece. So I'm going to be cutting on this line. I don't know if you could see that on camera. It's a little hard to see on the black, but now I'm going to, instead of having it cut here, I add the trim to it, make a line behind it. I just got to remember, not this line, not that line. Make our cuts. So I just wanted to show you guys really quick. This first line right here is cutting melamine with a jigsaw, okay? The finest tooth I can find. This next cut here is that same blade with the jigsaw with tape over it to help try to seal it in. It does nothing. This one right here, that's a track saw. Cut a couple more pieces of pine to fill in these gaps here. Alright, so now it's the scary part. I gotta use my router and run a groove here for my T-track. That's always the scary part. So I've got it clamped down on both sides. There's not much gripping power on this because there's only a little lip here. So what I basically did was I grabbed my level, a 2x4, and back here there's a couple of these composite shims so that when I'm riding this guide, I can't press it. It'll hit the wall, and it's basically just a safety measure to keep this thing from flexing in the middle. So let's give it a shot. Here's when things went a little bit wrong. I think my first mistake was using this Ryobi portable battery-operated router. I don't think it had enough juice. I don't think I was taking too big of a pass. I mean, again, I was going maybe 1/8 of an inch just to clear the melamine to get a nice clean cut. Then I thought it was maybe the batteries, but I just don't think it was powerful enough for doing what I wanted it to do. At least that's what I'm assuming. Ultimately, I resorted to taking almost the 1/16 of a pass. It just took like 10 passes to get through it. So I have two pieces of T-track, each 36 inches long. This second piece I put into place here, making a little pencil mark. And what's great about these being aluminum, you can use your wood blades to cut these. Just got to take it really slow. And now that I have everything in place and shimmed up and lined up where I want it to be, I just added a couple screws to lock down the miter saw, and we're done. Though, you know what? The top looks so good that those 2x4s don't look right. I think we're gonna replace everything with black walnut. Alright, so there you have it, my minimalist approach to a miter station. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. This was a fun one to make. I've worked with melamine before, but this is the first time I've had to put a dado slot in it. So some things I learned from there. Definitely the portable router was underpowered, I think. It was a new bit, at least that's what it said on the package. I mean, it was $4, but still, I assumed it was sharp. But yeah, it's not one of the elaborate ones you see on YouTube, just because I don't need all that. I already have enough storage. So I got plenty of room for dust collection under here, scrap wood. I have a spot over here for my generator to slide under. But yeah, this is my minimalist approach. Brand new saw, I can't wait to start using it really. And splurged on all the walnut. So I hope you guys enjoyed this one. Like, subscribe, hit the bell. See you on the next one.